Okay, hi everybody. I think we should be live now, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So welcome to the to a second Magento Fireside chat. This is kind of a spontaneous thing that just came up like 2 days ago or so, and yeah, basically the Alan kickstarted the idea because he's currently writing a new book with about test-driven Magento development, and we thought why not talk a little bit about that. So there won't be any presentations or maybe not even anything to show. So it's basically just a nice round with people who might have tried it, might have succeeded in testing or developing test-driven, or might have failed. So yeah, I'm curious to find out about everybody's experience, and yeah, let's see where this is going. If anybody listening or watching this broadcast wants to join, to step in to say something, you're very welcome to do so. I'll enable the Q&A module right now, or ping me on Twitter, or it might have succeeded in testing or developing test-driven, or might have failed. So yeah, I'm curious to find out. Okay, I had to mute beep. Okay, so yeah, just leave a note in the on the Hangout page or on Twitter or in the comments here in the Q&A section. You're very welcome to join this round. Yeah, we're looking forward to anybody's opinion. Okay, so I think I'll hand over to Alan now. Yeah, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your plan to for this new title that you're writing. I don't know. Did you start writing it? Is it still in a early planning phase? Yeah, let's get started. Let's dive into this topic.
Okay. So yeah, I already started writing the book. I haven't got that far. Like I'm like 20, 30 pages in, basically going over all the theory, what is TDD, what is VHEAD. The main reason I'm writing this book more than anything is because I want to get better at testing, and I want to get our internal here at DMAC, our developers, better at testing. It's an area that I feel is very, if not explored or often discussed by people or Magento developers, is something that is not that easy to do with Magento. So part of this book is trying new things that I never done before for testing, try new tools, and try to get a workflow that works, or in the worst case scenario, something that doesn't actually work, and at least I know that that's not the way to test extensions, right? The book is actually, I'm not talking about testing Magento code, core code, or anything that complicated. It's just for extension development, because I've seen that a lot on third-party extensions that are some of the extensions that you can find on Connect or third-party shops could benefit from even the most basic amount of testing. Yeah.
That's well said.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. What I'm hoping from this hangout is learn from you guys, see what everyone else is doing in terms of testing, if everyone is even doing some testing. I hope so. And see what tools are being used and what kind of a process is being used by everyone.
Okay, I think we maybe can do like a quick round to introduce ourselves and to talk a little bit about what our experience so far is and what we would like to do in the future. Just to basically like set up a setting for this. Are we talking about unit tests only, or is it like the wider range of testing whatever might give us that warm and fuzzy feeling that it's working fine? I mean, there is user acceptance testing, Selenium and JMeter stuff, performance testing in general. Test-driven development always has this annotation of like being very close to the code, unit tests. But I think in this group, it might be interesting to like widen that topic to testing on all levels in general. Yeah, so why don't we, I'm not sure if everybody's seeing everybody in the same order. So the next person next to Alan on my screen will be Ronaldo. You want to say something about your experience and yeah, what you guys are doing to
Sure. Yeah, so my experience with testing in Magento, I guess, hasn't been very good in the sense that it's really difficult, and I have this kind of pessimistic attitude of, well, because the core doesn't have tests, what's the point of kind of testing a model that just inserts data into a database? What value do I get out of that? So usually I recommend or focus on Selenium tests or behavioral tests, and kind of testing the end functionality that a business user might find more valuable than unit tests, even though I do wish it was easier to have those because they do have value if you do it right. So that's kind of my experience. So right now, I don't have much on the tester and development side. I would love for more people and teams to do it, but I don't do it myself, so I can't really say, hey, you guys should be doing this, because it's difficult to do. So.
Okay. Good. Let's go on with Kim.
Hi. So yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as Deep. Well, I've done unit tests before and more test-driven development strategies with Agile. Before I really started focusing on Magento, ever since working with Magento, I haven't done any, and I really want to put something in place for our team. For example, we just installed an extension, and after installing it, we could not re-index anything. It totally broke the tables. So, even just having a test that re-indexes everything before, a unit test for that. I think there's a couple really basic ones that we could have in place for every project, and I want to definitely get the team started on doing unit testing. Also, I would love to do something more with Selenium. So while I'm familiar with these technologies, I haven't been doing any of them for Magento.
Okay, thank you. Michael, you want to say something about yourself and what your experience is with testing in general?
Sure. You took me by surprise because Vinay is next on my list. But, sure. As we actually did a little talk about what we're doing here at Magento Imagine, but basically we started out developing our Magento extension, our one massive extension, with the idea in mind to do the full gamut of test-driven development. So we sort of knew it was over the top a little bit, but we wanted to do 100% code coverage and sort of stick strictly to a definition of unit tests that weren't really integration tests or anything beyond that. And it was very educational, which was really our goal. It wasn't, we weren't trying to be crazy. We were trying to learn the things that we knew we didn't know about test-driven development and unit testing. And it's been, in that sense, it's been successful. Magento is in many ways hard to test. And so we knew kind of where we basically knew the minefield that we were running into. We have a lot of very deep mocks in some of our tests, and a lot of tests that are, how should I say this? Basically, they're more like locking the code into place where you have to basically write the whole test every time you make a change to the code. And in those cases, now that we've relaxed that test-driven development constraint to something more practical, a lot of times we end up just deleting the test rather than trying to rewrite it. But in terms of, I think that in terms of educating oneself about test-driven development, it was kind of a immersion way of doing that, and that was very effective for us. I think we're being a lot more pragmatic about it now and trying to write tests. And as one of our developers says, the unit tests are for the developers. so that they can have a level of confidence about the changes. Because you run something like PHP Code Sniffer, and it comes up with a bunch of things, and then if you don't have any tests at all, you're actually afraid to make those changes because you just don't know what's going to blow up next. But if you have unit tests in place, you can have a certain level of confidence, and that I think is a very valuable thing for developers to have.
Good, thank you very much. So now the next on my list is VNAE.
Okay. Hi. So yeah, well, testing. I really enjoy that subject, so I'm very happy this is happening here. And for me, it's basically there are several different scenarios that define how I work with testing at the moment. So basically, one rough separation of areas there would be whether I'm developing a new module or whether I'm doing some kind of bug fixing in existing code, which unfortunately is a lot of the work I do still. So for the new code, when I first started, I found it very difficult to do TDD with Magento, but mainly due to the fact that I wasn't familiar with PHP Unit or the other tools very well. I didn't know them very well, and there wasn't a lot of boilerplate code in place for me to write the tests. But once that boilerplate code for writing different kind of Magento tests is in place, it's actually not a lot of work. So when creating new extensions or new modules, writing tests, doing TDD is pretty straightforward, and creating unit tests isn't a big deal anymore. However, I do not follow the 100% coverage goal unless for fun. I mean, it's kind of fun. It's like a game, right? Like a bet. Yay, got 100%. But it's like testing getters and setters. Did plenty of that, but I don't think it's worth it really. So that's one way. But if I'm working on existing code, basically I just follow more this integration test route where I want to reproduce the bug, or maybe even if it's adding a new feature to existing code, right? I prefer to take a more high-level approach, and let's say we've got this we want to apply some kind of filter to a list of products on a search page, and I'm doing that through an event observer. So I could just do a Selenium test and test the whole page, and after creating the fixture, like which products there should be, and check which ones are there, so that works. But I prefer working on a more low-level area there, so like maybe just loading the collection and then checking that the result isn't there. So that's not a unit test per se, because I'm still testing the whole ORM and everything else, not a specific method, and I'm not actually just calling my observer method. Instead, I'm loading the collection and then checking the result matches my expectations. So there I still work with fixtures a lot, whereas with unit tests, I generally simply just don't tend to not use fixtures at all, at least not database fixtures, and just mock many things. So I know there's a big discussion regarding mocking everything and mocking as little as possible right now. So I just kind of follow Michael's example, and what you said was felt very familiar too. Kind of more a pragmatic approach to okay, well, what do I need to mock in order to test what I want to have tested, right? What's the part that I want to know that works? Right? What's the important part? And that kind of approach also helps me avoid the other issue you mentioned, having your kind of lock-in, basically just creating mocks that mirror the exact flow of the code. So as soon as you change code, all your tests are worthless, right? That's one of the mistakes I started making for a while, and I think the only protection against that is experience. But so yeah. So and then of course on the highest level, it's for every real project, I like to have a couple of Selenium tests in place with whatever, be it JavaScript or anything, some kind of top-level tests, PHP unit or whatever, it doesn't really matter, where I test the main user interface actions. I don't know, add product to cart, checkout, search, customer registration, whatever is important on that specific side. But that's more of a high-level part then. Yeah.
Denai, what tools do you use for unit testing and Selenium testing? Do you use like a
Yeah, I mainly use PHP Unit just because it's possible to do almost everything with it, and it's just been around for so long, so it's so stable. There's so much documentation on it, and blog posts, and examples, and so many people who can ask for help. So that's a huge asset for me, being able to ask people for help. I liked Behat a lot and PHP Spec, except that PHP Spec, especially PHP Spec 2 with Prophecy for mocking, was very difficult to work with Magento, so I kind of just stopped. But
I'm dealing with that right now.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
but I have seen that Behat actually has been, and MageSpec as well, the development has been picked up again, so I want to give that another try. Might be in better shape right now. But at least PHP Spec, not for Magento 1. Just trying to mock magic getters and setters, Prophecy doesn't really allow that.
What about Selenium? Okay. Does anybody use like the TAF system?
Yeah, I mean, you can use Selenium with PHP Unit or with many of the JavaScript-based browsers or with Behat. So Selenium is more like just a tool that you can use. You can write the tests in different languages with. So I use PHP Unit mainly, also for Selenium.
Yeah, so we also use Selenium a lot. Actually, in some projects, a lot more than bare unit tests. I've created this Selenium framework based on PHP Unit called Menta a couple of years ago, which in the end is, again, PHP Unit tests that drive Selenium using the PHP WebDriver library. And we find ourselves actually getting a lot more out of Selenium tests than out of unit tests in some projects. I mean, especially if there's not too much fancy new logic happening. Really, what you need to know is if like an end-to-end test, if the user is seeing what he's supposed to see and if everything works there. So I think it really depends on what you're doing. For other projects where so we just finished building like a warehouse management tool where there's lots of custom code there, and there actually everything is covered by unit tests because we do lots of stuff. There's lots of logic that we want to test deep down. But in the end, everything goes back to being a PHP unit test case. So basically, we use PHP Unit as a tool for all our testing needs, and that's not necessarily a unit test always.
What about ecom dev?
Yeah, for like pure unit tests, we are actually using ecom dev because we found that they're doing testing a lot. They're making it a lot easier to test code. We found that we actually had to fork that, and I think there's a pull request pending because there's some assumptions there where like not every test case runs in full isolation. On the other hand, you might not want to have every test case run in full isolation because it might take forever. But so we added some more granularity there where like on a test case, using the annotation, you can basically tell it to reset the database or to delete the fixtures and all of that. But yes, ecom dev is a great tool so far. And whenever we are actually serious about unit testing, we're using ecom dev because there is some value in using ecom dev on top of pure PHP Unit. And actually, I would be very interested in your experience with ecom dev PHP Unit, or if you're using something else. Vinay, are you using something on top of PHP Unit? It sounded like you're more the...
Right. So I really like ecom dev PHP Unit a lot, and I tend to use it especially when I need the fixtures, because I love the fixture support they support. In the beginning, when I started using it, I found myself hitting a lot of walls, basically, because I started using it right from the start, and I found it like, okay, how do I test this? And ecom dev PHP Unit didn't do it, so I didn't know what to do. Yeah, so basically going back a step and trying to do everything with just PHP Unit, now it's not an issue anymore. Like I can use ecom dev PHP Unit for what it offers, but if it doesn't do what I need, then I can just do it myself. So it's more of a learning thing. So once again, I think testing Magento code, yeah, it's kind of nice, but it doesn't offer that much beyond setting up the test system and for a separate database and everything, which is great, and then offering the fixture support, which is really, really nice. And otherwise, mocking this or that is not very difficult afterwards. Once you work through the initial hurdles, so that's not my main reason to use it.
So if you're not using ecomdev for a lot of other things, how do you handle the mage god class if you need to like mock mage app or turn off event handling or something like that?
So generally, I use a custom config model, and if I need to mock blocks, a custom block model and a custom response object, and that's pretty much all that's needed. I don't really mock Mage app at all. I use the registry a lot for singleton and helper mocking, and the config model for mocking. It's similar to Mage ecomdev does, except it's simpler. And because I try to keep things as simple as possible. So for me, it works very well, right? Because it's very basic, and I know exactly what's happening. There's less magic involved. There's already so much magic going on with with everything there, right? So it's easier for me to understand, right, and keep things modular. And I know exactly what it does. So I have like my own custom mini framework, which I kind of tend to recreate on an as-needed basis for each project. But actually, I've decided for modules that I release somewhere, I wanted to start using more of ecomdev PHP unit, even if I wouldn't actually need it. People have set it up very often, so my tests should integrate easily with whatever other testing people use. So that's just a recent decision of mine. But otherwise, yeah, that's how I've been dealing with it.
So the problem that you're actually solving with your custom config object is having MageGet model and MageGet singleton that might be called somewhere deep down return your test object instead of creating a new one, or it might be creating your mock object. Is that right? So that's one thing that ecomdev also does with a lot more magic involved.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, and because I like to keep things simple and I want to understand what's happening, that's why I just chose to build just a very basic version of it and use that for most things. But you can I also mix and match, right? So if I find out one specific test needs some database setup because that's how I will get what I want from the test, well then I'll just use ecomdev PHP unit.
Okay. So before we continue this discussion, we have two more people join us in the meantime. There is Daniel Slov and Michael. You guys want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do and what's your experience or expectation when it comes to testing Magento code?
Wait. Go ahead. Sorry, can you actually hear me?
Yes, we can hear both of you.
Oh, good. Okay, you can go ahead.
Okay, so I don't do testing. I'm just here to listen to you guys. That's it.
Okay, I work with Smith, and I end up doing a lot of PHP unit testing. So I'm here to really gain any kind of little insights that I can from hearing you guys speak.
All right. Okay. Well, for a fact, I know that Daniel, first of all, does some amazing things with making Magento work on HHVM by contributing to the HHVM project. And I know that you put some time and energy into testing some popular Magento extensions to run them, but that's probably all like manual testing, right? There's no.
Yeah, it is. I wasn't really in the mood to create tests for other people's extensions, so yeah, it's mostly manual testing. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Back to the ecomdev versus PHP unit extension. Kim and Alan, what's your take on that? Are you, Alan, is your book going to be a good tutorial on how to use ecomdev, or?
Not sure yet. I've been looking a lot on, or started to look into Mage spec and Behead Mage as two of the tools that I want to include in the book. I started to go into a few problems with prophecy, as I mentioned. As soon as you have to mock anything with magic methods, that doesn't work with prophecy. So I don't know. I could include it. ecomdev. It's a really good tool. We use it not as much as we would like, But it is a good tool and has a lot of really nice features like the fixtures.
How about you,
I'm
Kim?
downloading it right now. And I'm actually going to see Yvonne next week, so I'll get all my questions ready to ask him.
Oh,
Nice.
good. Yeah, we should have invited him to this chat here too.
I am inviting him, but I think it's already late for him.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, very spontaneous. He's a busy man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I find testing a lot of fun, right? So, what's your? I mean, do you feel it's fun, or do you think it's more of a nuisance, or hate it, or whatever? I don't know. I think
we in almost every project we run through the same life cycle of like how we feel about testing. When we start the project, we say, okay, so now this project I'm going to do everything right, and we start setting up Selenium tests, unit tests, and like the first features are perfectly covered and test. Then as the project goes along, we start like ignoring them a little bit more, and then at some point we pick them up again. But so I think in the end we are very happy to have some test cases, and it makes us feel a little bit worried where we don't have like a good coverage with test cases, which sadly is still the case in a lot of modules and projects. So there's from a technical point of view, we have everything in place to have like a pure continuous deployment pipeline. Just recently, we figured out how to easily deploy things to AWS OpsWorks. So we could like literally have commits to the code base, trigger a series of static code analyzers, unit tests, Selenium tests, stress tests with JMeter, and deploy it to production. So this whole chain could be fully automatically and happening within an hour or so. The reason why we would still not feel very comfortable with that is, of course, because we don't have this good coverage of tests that make us comfortable that basically anything that might break production will be caught in one of the test steps, and that's kind of hard too, because that level of confidence is to get that is basically, I think, almost impossible, because there is always unexpected things that you did not cover by a test case, unexpected edge cases, especially when it comes to user input or to combination of features. Things happen that you could possibly not be testing before. But of course, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, especially when it comes to Selenium tests. I think you can catch a lot more with things that might be broken in the front end while playing with all these features. But yeah, in the end, I'm very happy that we take testing like seriously most of the time. And but it's also a big investment in time. So it takes a lot of time to think about all of that, to force ourselves to sit down and write the tests. I think it pays off to invest the time into the whole testing. But it doesn't come for free, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, especially like being in consulting services, like trying to justify to clients the time that you're adding on to their budget for testing is what the challenge is for us. But I think that just that level of confidence that you can give developers is so worth it. And I too like testing, and I mean the whole concept of test-driven development is that you're thinking through more of what you're trying to achieve with what you're writing. So, and by writing the tests first, you know what your expected results are. So I really enjoy it too. But do you like how do you get over that justification to the clients for how much time it takes for adding on for testing, or do they not really see that?
Most of our clients don't really know about that. It's fully transparent to them. It's basically our thing. If we mess up because we deliver things that are not well tested, then it's our fault. We're just working with one project. They're very technical, so they really truly appreciate our testing. Of course, they also have insight into our Jenkins setup, but that's a rare exception. Most of our clients basically trust us to do the right thing.
I find Kim, you got to test what you do anyway, right? Just by clicking through the browser maybe or whatever. So you basically have to test anyway. So I think the main challenge is having clients pay you for learning how to write the test. Once you know how to write the tests, I find most of it's more of a time saver. Every time I have to test 3 times manually, it's quicker to write a test. Well, it depends on how complex the test is, but I do find that's true quite often. And the biggest stopping point there is figuring out how to do it. But that's the investment.
Yeah.
Once people know how to do it, it's not that bad.
So one of the issues about test-driven development is the fact that you write the test up front, and I think that was you might have noticed the controversial discussion with the series of Hangouts that happened a couple of weeks ago, which is definitely worth watching. Before we dig into that, we have one more person who joined us in the meantime. That's Brent. Brent, do you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you guys do and how you deal with testing or not testing?
Sure. My name is Brent Peterson. We have an agency in Minneapolis and in Cochabamba, Bolivia. So we handle testing for features internally. The developers each test their own feature, and then we've just started a QA department for internal testing of the feature. And now we're also working on some kind of front-end testing for if it's something simple that the client wants to see, we get the client involved at that point to make sure that what we're testing is what they want to see, and that's just simple like, does the menu look right? Does it come down the right speed? You know, sort of that end user testing that's not part of a development, but more part of a UX. So I think you kind of have to separate the testing out. Maybe it's more QA at that point. But for actual feature or for product testing, the developers each do that internally. And we build that into the cost of whatever we're doing.
And are you using unit testing, Brent, or are the developers just like testing, clicking through?
We have both. We have developers that use that the MCDs that we have would be using some unit testing. The non-MCDs that are just doing sort of the front end features would just be doing browser testing and clicking through things like that.
How often do you guys feel that you have something that's like, a good fit for unit tests? Because I always, so basically when it comes to testing, my main problem is that a lot of things when it comes to like modifications, like visual modifications or like a block here, a feature there, those are not things that are happening really on like, let's say a PHP class level or a method level. It's basically the combination of a lot of things, including layout, even templating, that basically make this feature what it is. And even though ecom dev basically helps a little bit to also like introspect in what's happening into the layouts and including configuration, that's another big thing. This basically, in my opinion, is not really a unit test anymore. It's kind of more like an integration test. How do you feel? How do you distinguish unit tests from something between? We better test that on the front end directly, automated or manually.
Yeah, I think that at that point you have to either do Selenium or some kind of automated testing that would go through a whole bunch of procedures to make sure that it works. Because I think a unit test is only going to test the unit, and by definition, really, that is just that piece. And that piece should work, but then you need to know the piece is going to work with everything else. And then you need to know that everything else is going to work with everything else. So at that point, you know, we have manual testers that just test the feature, and then we try to place an order and all the other normal things. But I think the ultimate goal would be to some kind of automated Selenium process that allows the whole thing to run through a script that, you know, add to cart, even create an order, make a user, all the little things that you wouldn't even think would matter, that all of a sudden, you know, you've made this feature that now the customer can't log in because something else was touched.
Yeah, well, that's a common effect, right? You do something here, and then all of a sudden something very unexpected happens somewhere else, like not being able to log in anymore, or not being able to place an order because something went wrong with, don't know, the payment provider code that you just worked on or whatever. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then making sure that your final staging environment isn't exactly the same setup as what your production environment is. So
Right.
something works just fine on your development server, then you go to production and they're on a whole different environment and their PHP is different, or just the things that come up as you go through the whole testing process. That final test and staging should really be on the identical environment before you go live.
Yeah.
So regarding your question, I think for me the main difference would be whether the test requires the Magento application to be initialized beyond the autoloader or not. So for unit tests, I would think definitely not. Like, you don't use any core methods except ones inherited. So any call to, you want to completely mock out the other system or just not use it at all as much as possible. And I only do that when writing new code and when, more of a, I don't know. It depends on the time. So not too good, except for when it's some stuff, like you said, like or warehouse management, like complex logic. That's something where I think that's very valuable. Also because it forces me to clean the whole, think more about what I actually want to get out of it, out of the code, how to structure it and everything. And everything else is just integration tests, which is great also. I mean, that's my favorite type, actually.
I think that's something that we haven't really talked about much in this discussion, that a really important part of the testing, not just test-driven development, but whatever approach you use to testing, is that the tests themselves inform the design of the software. And so what you were saying, if you think of, like, when you're writing the tests, it forces you to think about the code you're writing in a certain way. And a lot of times, if you're just writing code and you're not really thinking about testing at all, you'll write it in a way that has, tight coupling and certain types of dependencies that would make the code untestable. And you'll find out later when you try to test it after the fact that that code is difficult to test because of these things. And I think that's one of the huge benefits, and often one of the understated benefits of testing, is that you end up writing this code that is really, it forces you to design the unit. And so it really has great, very powerful ramifications for things like loose coupling and encapsulation.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I experience that when I'm writing code and I know that I'm going to unit test that code, that like instantly improves the way I think about that, because I know, okay, if I'll mess everything into one class and they're in one big method, there's no chance I will ever be able to unit test that. So I think that's a very nice side effect, and I'm wondering if like others share that experience, that it has, like, it's not only the benefit of having a test there, but it makes you do better decisions about how to design your code.
Absolutely. I think that's the main benefit, actually, for me. Now, and that's where it's difficult to test Magento 1, because you can't use clean injection with methods that work the Magento way. I mean, you can always build outside of the Magento framework, but then you're outside of the Magento framework. So normally you can't really do that. And that's where it gets ugly. But it's still testable. So it's a trade-off between code that's tested or writing Magento code that you can only test with integration tests. So it's still valuable, I think, because, like Michael said, it forces you to think about how to create your units. But that also touches very heavily on the "Is TDD Dead" Hangout series you mentioned earlier, right? Test-induced damage, or what we call it. Call it. Yeah.
Well, like I think testing legacy code and basically Magento 1 can probably be already considered legacy code. At least it's like existing code that's not tested. I think that's like a whole topic itself. We were hired early this year for like 3 developers, 6 weeks to go in to work with the client's team to basically cover what they have written with unit tests, because they knew they wanted to upgrade and to extend that, but they knew what they have done in the past was like a big mess. It was all about collect totals and sales rules. So we basically spent a lot of time coming up with test cases for all their custom code and how sales rules in Magento work by default. And that was a very good experience for us. We learned a lot about that while doing that. But also we found ourselves in this creating like mocking stuff versus fixtures, like controversial lot. And when it came to mocking, we had like these situations where, like in the Magento legacy code, basically to mock one thing, you easily end up mocking like 3 or 4 or even more levels down stuff to abstract from things that this object that you actually need to interact with needs to do its thing. And this then didn't feel really right. And on the other hand, like creating sales rules, putting them into the database is a lot easier, but also it's like it's not really unit tests then anymore at this point. So what's your guys, and that's basic for everybody, what's your experience? Do you even try to go back and cover existing code, maybe yours or maybe other modules code, or even cover some crucial Magento feature that your code relies on with the unit test, or is that just a risk that that you have to?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that with one of our really old extensions that was built without any kind of testing, that was built like 3 years ago. So trying to refactor that and build tests around that code, which actually is also related to sales rules. So it's so far it's been a challenge, right? Because there is so much code involved just trying to in the Magento end. Like for example, for this specific function, I had to it uses an observer, right? So just trying to bug that observer and 3 functions, it ended up taking me like 2-3 hours trying to dig that and build a proper mock and try to get that working properly with tests. So I guess it's going to be more of I don't know. It's going to be box versus fixtures. I really don't know, and it's going to be a thing where it makes the most sense. At least that's what I'm.
You're breaking up a little bit, and now you're actually gone. No, here you are.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't know if you got that or did it go? Yep.
Okay. So we have one more person joining. Hi, Ben. Hi, how are you?
Okay, how are you guys?
Are you in the airport, Ben?
Yeah, I'm at the Sky Club in Detroit.
Yeah, Ben, why don't you, like, I don't know if you need to introduce yourself, but why don't you say how you experience testing? What's your pain point, if you think that's the way to go, if it's well invested time? Yeah, what's your take on this whole testing Magento stuff?
Well, let's remember that I don't have to actually work for a living anymore. I just get to socialize and hang out. Back when I did work for a living, the testing pain point, that was just if the QA person was hungover, because it's QA was very deliberate process, and yeah, I don't know if the company's moved on. That company's moved on to getting testing more integrated into their process, but yeah, so the pain point itself was in fact testing. I think a few guys did play around with ecom dev, but as far as generating individual coverage for individual clients, it didn't happen.
Okay. Good. In the chat, I can see, Alan, you had like a question from somebody contacting you by Twitter or so. You want to pick that up?
Sure. It's I got that question when Brian was talking about QA, right? And this is not actually related per se to testing, more how the QA process works, especially when you're working with an agile team. So. Anyone has any experience working with, or what are your impressions of working, integrating QA into the development process? That's basically the gist of the question.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, what I think the way it's supposed to be is that the team agrees on a so-called definition of done, and I think that feature being well tested needs kind of to be part of that definition of done, and then the team basically agrees on if that means writing unit tests or having it fully configured on the deploy system and having it tested. So I think it really doesn't make that much of a difference if the team is structured in an agile way or not. In the end, it's the team's responsibility to come up with a solution they feel comfortable with, and that gives them the confidence in that topic being well tested or not. I'm not sure if that's answering the essence of this question. I'm not sure if there's a crucial difference between agile teams and non-agile teams when it comes to making sure that the stuff is tested. Maybe the question is more about, is it the same set of people who develop these things and then test it, or are the developers at some point handing over their features with some testing instructions, or maybe even without the testing instructions, to another group of people who does the testing?
That's a really good point.
Okay. So how do you handle that? Is it the same people? Is it the same group of people who tests, or maybe is it even the same developer testing his own stuff, or is it like the same person in the same team, or is it, and maybe that's on purpose, is it a totally different team that doesn't have too much insight in the project to test things, or maybe that only works for very specific tests that only scratch the surface?
In our particular case, it's the same team, not necessarily the same developer, and I'm actually trying to avoid that on our team because, at least for us as developers, it's very easy to get blind spots on your code, right? So we try to have a completely different person inside of the team to test that functionality and make sure it's working as supposed to. I don't know if anyone else wants to add how they do the QA on the company. Anyone?
You're asking if anybody has a dedicated QA team, or what's your question?
I think we're trying to do a dedicated QA team now where we have a separate person, and I noticed that Ben just chimed in that the developer can't always be responsible for doing his own QA because the developer is always going to click on the same thing. They're going to do the same procedures over and over again, and then it's going to be difficult to, the end user is going to do something completely different that nobody expects, and having a second person in there or a team in there that kind of does those things maybe that the developer wasn't thinking of, that's the ultimate way of QAing a lot of those items, especially if it's a feature where there's a lot of feedback needed from the end user, not just something that happens and then a bunch of things happen and then you get a result. So we're trying to implement just a QA process and a team that would be involved in that, and then we want the developer at the end of their ticket to write what the feature would be and write the QA test for the QA team.
Mm-hmm.
That gives everybody sort of an idea what should happen, and also should put that feature in the understanding of anybody that reads it, so they don't have to be really technical.
Yeah. one of the problems that we experience is that usually there is no clear testing instruction when there's a handoff to another person or to another team to test that. So we still need to work on that to basically come up with expected results and like possible edge cases, because especially if that's like a QA team that might not even have any Magento experience, you basically need to tell him what was the initial specification, what is it what we try to implement, and what they should be testing. I think it fails in some cases with the tester not being really aware of what he should be looking for, and the developers being too lazy to actually give him good instructions.
That kind of brings us to the point that Alan mentioned with Behat, right? I mean, that's what that's supposed to solve, using some kind of feature specifications that translate into tests that developers still have to write, but then it's very clear what is the expected result. So you get the nice direct communication between the end client and the developer through a common language. That's fascinating reading, but I actually haven't done that in real projects yet. I mean, just use the tools, but that's different, of course, because I think the main value there is in the process of defining what needs to be done and the communication with the client and the developers and between them.
I explored Behat a little bit and I like it a lot. I also saw teams working with it successfully, but I'm not sure if Behat is the right way to go, because Behat basically implies that a person who has no clue, no technical insight on what's going on should be the right guy to test your stuff by writing something that's like easily readable. And I feel like this is this person by definition is not the right guy who should be testing your stuff. Even if the right guy doesn't need to be like a Magento developer, it's like too much of an abstraction. I think you can only scratch the surface. Maybe I'm not like capturing the essence of the Behat test, but in the end, if every step basically needs to be implemented by developer and then has a reflection in a Behat test, it's like only so many combinations of things that you can cover by a Behat test. This might work very well for lots of things, but when it comes to a lot more complex workflows or scenarios, I think you'll reach some barriers with Behat really quickly, where you end up spending all your time writing those features anyways, and then writing the actual test case is like a trivial thing that the developer will be doing anyways. So I think there's some good use cases, but I haven't found a good part where this could fit into our workflow really well.
I don't think you can go for 100, like you can't use, or maybe you shouldn't. I don't know, as I said, experience there. But I like the idea a lot. I think the main value, from what I understood from Marcelo and the other talks from the guys behind Behat, Everset, and so on, that you basically, the features and the specs should be written together by client and developer, so they have a common understanding. And you don't have, some kind of specification where the developer just writes one thing that doesn't actually meet the business requirements. But yeah, as I said, that's something I would like to try out. And the main benefit there would be that the developer has the same understanding of the expected result as the client, and it's somewhat documented. It doesn't necessarily, probably could even be complete that way.
Okay.
It's more what the understanding might be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're almost hitting the 1 hour. There's one new person who joined us. Do you want to introduce yourself and to talk a little bit about what your testing experience is?
Are you talking about me?
Yes, yeah. I did.
Yeah. This is Chen 10 Adam 3. People call me Adam here.
Okay.
I have been a Magento solution partner since May 2008. Now I'm on my own, and I'm always eager to learn the updated Magento information, so I joined the group. Yeah, my company is epacificweb.com. You can go on the internet and look at it. Yeah.
Okay, so what's your testing workflow? Are you doing lots of unit tests or testing on other levels? How is your setup?
I hardly test it. I'm a developer. My client tests my coding, not me. But I know how to test it.
All
I'm
right.
certainly know how to test it. So if you need some people to test it, I will do the job for you with a
Okay.
reasonable pay.
Okay, I think I mean I think we could go probably on for some more time. We should probably still wrap that up. There's one last question that I think when talking about test-driven development, I would be very interested in who's actually following that test-driven development principle and tries to write the unit test first that fails and then implement the feature. Who's tried that? Who thinks that this works well, and who's still doing it?
Okay.
I've definitely done that before. I think it was about 10 years ago. And we were in I was working in a software shop where all the developers had to do the tests first, and people really embraced it and enjoyed it. Like Vinay said, it was fun. And I think once you get people in the mindset of it, it works, and it doesn't really end up adding on all that extra time that you think it's going to add on. But like I said, I haven't been doing any testing with Magento. I think because it's, at first it was just so difficult, the learning curve for Magento. But that's what I want to get moving towards. And yeah, I'm totally checking out the ecom dev PHP unit. I used PHP unit for that testing, the test-driven development in the past, and it worked out really well.
So are you still planning on going the same route and try to write a test that fails in the first place first before writing the actual code that you need to test?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it helps developers think through things better when you do it that way.
Yeah, I think that's the basic idea behind that principle, to make them think ahead.
So I think we have to distinguish here between first you write all the tests and then you implement the code, or, well, you write a test, you write a little bit of code. You write a test, you write a little bit of code, and so on, right? Which is, I didn't have any real success the first way, to be honest. I tried writing all the tests and then writing all the code to satisfy it, but I ended up having to change the test because probably I didn't think it through good enough. But in the end, what I tend to do, and for important projects, I still like doing that. I do write tests and then code and then tests and then code. Unless I consider something more of a learning thing, like let's see if this works, or if I consider a module a quick hack, that's different, then I don't do that. Only for maybe one or two methods that are important. And then sometimes after the fact.
Yeah, I think the incremental way is definitely the way to go, especially if you're working in sprints and doing more of like a Scrum Agile project.
Yeah, when I tried that, and I have to admit I like failed in trying to write the test first, I experienced that basically this only works for very simple things like and in those tutorials where you have like a simple calculator class or whatever you test. But whenever it comes to a little bit more complex things, I'm basically designing what I'm trying to implement while looking at the code. So it's very hard to write the test case up front. So maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I felt like that simply didn't work for me. Plus, I mean I would still basically write the test and the actual code within the same hour or within the same day, but it's always going to be the actual code first and then the test. And I also see that while you develop things, you basically end up reiterating over things a lot. So the initial test case that I write is almost never going to be that test case that will stick for a very long time, because while you develop the code, you go back and just restructure the code. And so my experience with trying to write test cases up front is it only works for really, really simple things. And yeah, so I dropped that really early, and I haven't been picking that up since then. Other experiences with that?
I think most company, use the same process as how do you call your first name? Fabrizio. Fabrizio.
Yeah, Fabrizio.
Just say it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Until they met the problem, then they come back to use the unit test and find out the problem. Yeah.
Right. Okay, we have Talesh, is that pronounced right? Joining us. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and what's your experience with testing in general?
Hey guys, sorry, I just I'm here just for a few minutes, so I'm not gonna stick around long. I've been around with Magento for many years, and I pretty much know most of the guys: Kimberly, Vinay, Brent. So yeah, I just saw the link and hopped on. So.
Yeah, do you guys do testing? Do you do unit tests? Are you using ecomdev, or what tools are you using?
None right now. I'm here to learn.
Okay. All right. Okay. So yeah, so that's been a great hour. Unless you have any topics you want to pick up right now, we could extend that. Otherwise, I would say let's wrap this up. Let's think about other topics so we could do another fireside chat and continue this series in the future. Yeah, so is there anything you want to, another question or another comment, you want to show something? That will be the time now.
Well, one thing that crossed my mind that might be interesting in the future is, like Alan, you've used Codeception. I don't know if you're still using it or not. You use Menta. I wouldn't mind doing maybe a little series. It could be separate from this series where we just kind of get together and somebody, you showcase basically just, okay, this is the feature I want to test and this is the code I write. So it's more like looking over the shoulder while you do one thing, so we can see the different approaches people take on a more concrete level to doing something.
Yeah. I like that idea a lot, yeah.
That'd be great.
Let's do a part 2 of that. Everybody gets like a 5 or 10 minute slot to show a simple test case that with his tool set, can be unit test, can be Selenium test. Maybe we should cover JMeter too or other stress tests to show something. And maybe we can have like a big variety of tools covered in that second.
Maybe we split that into separate, like one session, one hangout is one tool, and that can only be 20 minutes, and then another day the next one, so we don't have like this big 1 hour chunk of information kind of getting all mixed up, but they're kind of separate, and people can look at them kind of also as a reference or whatever. It might be more useful and easier to do if the time is shorter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well. Okay. Well, maybe we can schedule like 1 or 2 or 3 tools per session to still keep that in under an hour. I want to avoid having like a 10-part series of sessions for that. But yeah, so let's try to coordinate that. Let's try to collect ideas what we would want to show, and let's make that kind of a visual walkthrough, maybe even like live coding or showing that on slides or whatever. But so we can get a good impression on how that tool works, what's the benefit, what's the downsides, and what's the perfect use case for that tool. And I'm sure even with the group, with our group here in the Hangout, we will probably easily be able to come up with 10 different tools. Yeah. So I'll try to. I don't know where we would collect these. We'll find something. I'll reach out to you on Twitter or via email so we can collect some ideas. And of course, as always, if anybody watching this has something that he wants to share, get in touch with any of us, and we should continue this and get a little bit more hands-on and show our tool set. So yeah, I can see lots of interesting tools. I'm very excited about learning about what even if that's not so mainstream things. Vina, in the chat, you just mentioned this Atom.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's meant to
that
be
might be an
great,
interesting
but
one.
the documentation is French, so I'm kind of stuck. But the French guys dig it, so I would love to, hear somebody who uses it with Magento. But okay.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Yeah, this has been very great. Thank you very much, everybody. And let's continue the testing portion of that. And I hope to see all of you in a follow-up or in 2 or 3 follow-ups of this session, and to get a little bit more input and to get more like actual code and actual problems solved, and I hope we can take some of these things home into our development teams. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sounds
Have a
good.
good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.